The exhaustion was a physical weight, a heavy cloak I had been dragging across 3 airports and 2 time zones. After a grueling week at a surgical conference in Geneva, all I wanted was the familiar comfort of my own bed. I slipped into the house silently, not wanting to wake my husband, Ben. The bedroom was dark, a sliver of moonlight painting a stripe across the floor. I could see his shape under the covers, a steady, breathing presence. I slid into bed beside him, the cool sheets. A welcome relief, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, grateful to be home. But when the morning sun streamed through the window, I rolled over with a contented sigh, and my world ended. The man sleeping next to me, his face peaceful in the morning light, was not my husband. My first reaction wasn't a scream. It was a profound, system-shocking silence. My mind, trained to assess and diagnose, simply could not compute the data. The man in my bed had Ben's sandy brown hair, but it was shorter, styled differently. His face had a similar structure, but the jaw was sharper, the nose straighter. He was a rough sketch of my husband, a first draft, a version that was close but fundamentally, terrifyingly wrong. I slid out of bed, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I backed away slowly, my eyes scanning the room for clues. Ben's clothes were gone from the chair where he always left them. In their place was a suit I'd never seen before. On the nightstand, where Ben's worn copy of a poetry book always sat, there was a sleek, modern tablet. This was my room, but it was an uncanny valley version of it, subtly altered, profoundly wrong. The man stirred, his eyes fluttering open. They were blue. Ben's eyes were a warm, gentle hazel. These were the color of a winter sky, cold and piercingly intelligent. He sat up, saw me standing by the door, and smiled. It was not Ben's smile. "Anya, good morning," he said, his voice a smooth, confident baritone. Ben's voice was softer, with a slight rasp. "You were so tired last night, I didn't want to wake you. I couldn't find my own voice." I just stared at him, my mind screaming a single silent question. "Who are you?" You're not Ben," I finally managed to whisper, the words feeling thin and foolish in the quiet room. The man smiled and faltered, but it became tinged with a look of deep, loving concern. It was a look I would come to dread. "Darling, what are you talking about?" he said, standing up, wrapping a silk robe around a body that was leaner, more muscular than my husband's. "The jet lag must be worse than you thought." "Of course I'm Ben." He walked towards me, and I flinched, taking a step back. "No," I said, my voice gaining a tremor of conviction. "No, you're not." He sighed, a patient, patronizing sound. "Okay, Anya, okay, let's not panic." He walked over to the dresser and picked up a silver-framed photograph. It was from our wedding. It showed me, smiling and radiant, on the arm of the man now standing in my room. It wasn't the picture that was supposed to be there. Our wedding photo featured my Ben. "Look," he said gently. "Here we are, our wedding day. Remember how it rained right after the ceremony?" He knew. He knew that detail, a small, intimate memory. My mind railed. He then picked up another photo, one of us in Paris. Again, it was his face, not Ben's. Every photograph in the room had been changed. They were perfect forgeries of my life, with this stranger seamlessly edited in. "I don't understand." I whispered, sinking onto a chair. "You've been under immense stress." "Anya," he said, kneeling before me, his cold blue eyes filled with a perfect imitation of love. "This conference, the long hours at the hospital, you're exhausted. Your mind is playing tricks on you. But it's okay. I'm here. I'm your husband, and I'm going to take care of you." His words were meant to be a comfort, but they felt like a cage door swinging shut. He was telling me not to trust my own mind. He was telling me to accept this new, terrifying reality he had constructed. He thought he was dealing with a confused, exhausted woman. He didn't realize he was dealing with a surgeon, a woman trained to spot the smallest anomaly, to cut through the skin and find the disease hiding underneath. And I knew, with a certainty that cut through my fear, that there was a deep, malignant sickness in my house. That afternoon, he left for a meeting, telling me to rest. The moment the door closed, I ran to Ben's art studio in the back of our house. The door was locked. It was never locked. I broke the lock with a fire extinguisher, my hands shaking. The room was ransacked. Canvases were slashed, sculptures were overturned, sketches were torn. It was a scene of pure, violent desperation, as if someone had been searching for something. But in the corner, behind a fallen easel, was a single, untouched painting. It was a dark, abstract piece Ben had been working on, but in the bottom right corner, almost invisible, was a small, strange symbol I had never seen before, a serpent eating its own tail, but with a single stylized feather in the center of the circle. It was a deliberate mark, a clue. And as I stared at it, a horrifying realization dawned. This wasn't a random break-in. This wasn't a case of my own memory failing. This was a message. And the man in my bed wasn't just an imposter. He was a hunter. And he was still searching for his prey. The silence in the house was no longer empty. It was watchful. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind outside sounded like a footstep, a breath. I was living with a man who wore my husband's life like a suit, and I had to pretend to believe the illusion. The most terrifying part was how good he was. He knew Ben's favorite coffee, the name of my chief resident, and the story of our disastrous first date. He was a perfect mimic, a ghost who had not just haunted my house, but had learned to operate its machinery. My only anchor to sanity was the symbol from the painting, the feathered serpent, a secret I now held in a house where I was the only one who knew I was a prisoner. I began to play the most difficult role of my life, the woman with the fractured mind. I would forget things, asking him to remind me of names or events. I would look at him with a carefully crafted expression of dawning recognition, allowing a little more memory to return each day. Oh, I'd say, touching the fake wedding photo. I think I remember the rain now. It felt lucky, didn't it? It did, darling, he would reply, his cold eyes softening with triumph. See, it's all still in there. You just need to rest. He was a masterful actor. He was attentive, cooking me dinner, running me baths, telling me to take time off from the hospital. His care was a velvet prison. He was isolating me, cutting me off from my colleagues, my friends, my entire support system, all under the guise of loving concern. He would answer my phone, telling my assistant I was unwell and needed complete rest. He was consolidating his control, and I was letting him because I had no other choice. Thought my investigation had to be silent, meticulous. While he was out on his meetings I suspected had nothing to do with Ben's art world, I would search. I didn't dare use our computers. I assumed they were monitored. My search was physical. I looked for Ben's real documents, his passport, his wallet. They were gone. Everything had been replaced with forgeries bearing this man's face. My only lead was the symbol, the feathered serpent. I drew it from memory on a scrap of paper, my surgeon's hand perfectly replicating the strange stylized design. I had no access to the outside world, no way to research it. The symbol was a key with no lock. One afternoon, while he was in the shower, I took a risk. I went into Ben's ransacked studio. The chaos was a smokescreen, I realized. The destruction was too theatrical. It was meant to look like a robbery, but it was a targeted search. I began to look not at the damage, but at what was left behind. Ben was a chaotic artist, but he had a system. He kept meticulous records of his work in a series of leather-bound journals. The journals were all there, but when I opened them, the pages were blank. The originals had been taken, but Ben was clever. He was an artist. He thought in layers and hidden meanings. I remembered a conversation we'd had years ago about how he hated the sterility of digital records. Art needs a soul, Evie, he'd said. It needs a secret. I went back to the one untouched painting, the one with the symbol. I ran my hands over the canvas. It was thicker than usual, the texture uneven. Taking the smallest scalpel from a medical kit I kept in my study, I made a tiny, careful incision at the edge of the canvas. It wasn't just one canvas. It was two, expertly glued together. My heart pounded as I carefully separated them. Tucked between the layers was a single folded sheet of paper. It was a page from one of Ben's real journals, written in his familiar, messy scrawl. It wasn't a letter or a confession. It was a list of names, dates, and what looked like inventory numbers, each one next to a small, hand-drawn replica of the feathered serpent symbol. And at the bottom of the page, a single cryptic sentence: "They think I'm just an artist. They don't know I kept the provenance. The real danger isn't in what I forged, but in what I found. It's safe with the heart of the city, provenance." A word from my old life in art history, before medicine. It meant the history of ownership, the proof of authenticity. Ben hadn't just been a struggling artist. He was involved in something far more dangerous. He was forging not just art, but history. The list in my hand was a ledger of his crimes, or perhaps his victims, and he had hidden the proof, the provenance, somewhere he called the heart of the city. Suddenly, The imposter's presence made a terrifying kind of sense. He wasn't here because of Ben's debts. He was here because Ben had something on them, something powerful enough to destroy them, and they thought I knew where it was. My house was no longer just a prison. It was a hunting ground. And I was the only one who knew the map to the treasure. Even if I didn't understand it yet, the phrase heart of the city echoed in my mind, a cryptic clue in a deadly scavenger hunt. I was no longer just a captive. I was the unwilling guardian of a secret that had likely cost my husband his life, or at least his freedom. The man I called Leo, a name I had given him in the privacy of my own thoughts, as I refused to call him Ben, was growing more impatient. The facade of the loving, concerned husband was beginning to crack, revealing the cold, predatory watchfulness beneath. He would ask me casual questions, laced with a terrifying intensity. "Darling, do you remember that little gallery Ben was so fond of downtown? The one with the funny name? Or Ben was working on a big commission before the accident, wasn't he? Something for a very important client?" He was probing, searching for any flicker of recognition, any sign that my amnesia was lifting. I was a locked safe, and he was trying every possible combination to my mind. The analytical, problem-solving mind of a surgeon went to work on the riddle, heart of the city. It wasn't a gallery. It wasn't a park. Ben was an artist, but he was also a romantic, a man who thought in metaphors. The heart of a city isn't a place. It's what gives it life, what makes it beat. What had I designed that fit that description? The Orion Tower was my masterpiece, the tallest building in the city, a soaring monument of glass and steel. But it was more than that. I had designed its core infrastructure, its heart, a revolutionary geothermal energy system that circulated heat and power throughout the building, like a human circulatory system. It was a closed loop, a self-sustaining ecosystem in the heart of the city. It was a place only a handful of people had access to: the chief engineer, the building's owner, and me, the architect. And I remembered something else. During its construction, Ben had been fascinated by the project. He had convinced me to let him install a small, permanent art piece in the main pump room of the geothermal core, a time capsule, he'd called it. A small, abstract bronze sculpture. A gift to the building. A gift to me. He had called it Urban Heartbeat. Now I had a location. But getting to it was another matter. Leo watched me like a hawk. I was a patient, still in recovery. I couldn't just leave the house and go downtown. I needed a reason, a legitimate medical excuse. My opportunity came in the form of a follow-up appointment with my neurologist, the optimistic young doctor who had first noticed my signs of emergence. I told Leo about the appointment. "I'd like to go alone," I said, testing him, my voice deliberately hesitant. I need to feel independent again. Just for an hour. I saw the conflict in his eyes. The controller in him wanted to refuse, but the actor playing the part of the supportive husband had to agree. "Of course, darling," he said, his smile a little too tight. "But let me have my driver take you, for your safety." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a condition. His driver was a silent, imposing man who I knew was one of his minders. But it was a risk I had to take. The next day, the driver took me to the hospital. I went into the neurologist's office, and the moment the door was closed, I dropped the act. "Dr. Evans," I said, my voice clear and urgent. "My name is Anya Sharma. I am a surgeon. I have not had amnesia. For the past 2 months, I have been held captive in my own home by a man pretending to be my husband. I am in grave danger, and I need your help." The young doctor stared at me, his face a mask of shock. To his immense credit, he didn't dismiss me. He saw the surgeon in my eyes, the cold, hard clarity. I explained the situation as quickly as I could, leaving out the details of the art forgery, but emphasizing the danger. I didn't ask him to call the police. That would be too noisy, too risky. Leo would be alerted instantly. I needed something else. I need a diversion, I said. "I need you to create a medical emergency. A reason for me to be rushed to the main hospital campus downtown near the Orion Tower. I need 1 hour." Dr. Evans hesitated for only a moment. He picked up his phone. "This is Dr. Evans," he said, his voice now filled with a convincing urgency. "I have Dr. Anya Sharma here. She's having a seizure, non-responsive. I need an ambulance to the main campus for an emergency MRI stat." Within minutes, I was on a gurney, being rushed out of the clinic, past my waiting, confused driver. The scissor was my ticket to freedom. In the ambulance, I told the paramedics the truth. They were skeptical, but a quick call from Dr. Evans, Who told them to follow Dr. Sharma's instructions without question sealed it. They were now my co-conspirators. They dropped me not at the emergency room, but a block away from the Orion Tower. "You've got 1 hour, Doc," the paramedic said, giving me a grim nod. I ran. My legs, still weak from months of disuse, burned, but I ran. I entered the tower using my old architect's access card, praying it still worked. It did. I took the service. Elevator down to the sub-basement. To the heart of the building. The pump room was a cavern of humming machinery and tangled pipes. And in the center, on a small pedestal, was Ben's sculpture, Urban Heartbeat. It was a beautiful, abstract bronze piece, a swirl of interconnected lines. It looked solid. But I knew Ben. I ran my hands over it, feeling for a seam, a hidden latch. I found it at the base. A section of the bronze was hollow. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small, leather-bound ledger and a data stick, the provenance. I tucked it into my coat pocket just as my phone, the one the paramedics had given me, buzzed. It was a text from Dr. Evans. "Driver called imposter. They know you're not at the hospital. They're coming for you." My heart leaped into my throat. The game was up. Leo knew I had been faking. He knew I had run. And he would know exactly where I had run to. I was in the sub-basement of a skyscraper, miles of concrete and steel between me and the outside world, with the proof that could destroy a dangerous criminal organization in my pocket. The humming of the machinery no longer sounded like a heartbeat. It sounded like a countdown clock. I could hear the ding of the service elevator arriving at the basement level. The hunt was over. The confrontation was about to begin. The soft ding of the service elevator echoed through the pump room, a death knell in the heart of my own creation. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. I was trapped in the sub-basement of a 90-story skyscraper with a man who had stolen my life and was now coming to end it. I clutched the ledger in my pocket, its weight, both a terrifying burden and my only weapon. In that moment, the surgeon in me took over. The situation was critical. The patient was my own life, and I had seconds to devise a radical, desperate procedure for survival. The elevator doors slid open, and Leo stepped out, flanked by the silent, imposing man who had been my driver. He wasn't smiling anymore. His face was a mask of cold, controlled fury. His blue eyes scanned the room and locked onto me. "Clever, Anya," he said, his voice dangerously soft as he walked towards me. "Very clever, the amnesia, the helpless act. You had me fooled. I almost felt sorry for you." "The feeling wasn't mutual," I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I backed away slowly, putting a large, humming geothermal pump between us. "Give it to me," he said, his voice flat. It wasn't a request. The ledger. Ben wasn't as smart as he thought he was. He stole from us. Not just money, but our history. Our proof of ownership for pieces worth hundreds of millions. That ledger is our property. So that was it. Ben hadn't just been a forger. He had been the organization's master authenticator, the man who created the fake histories, the provenances for their priceless stolen artworks. And then he had stolen the proof back, a final, desperate act of rebellion or self-preservation. "The police are on their way," I bluffed, my mind racing, assessing the room, the machinery, the potential exits. Leo laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Are they? I think not." "You're too smart for that, Anya. You know they wouldn't get here in time." "No, this will be quiet. You'll give me the ledger, and then you'll have a tragic accident. A fall, perhaps. A woman in your fragile condition. No one will question it." He and his associate began to circle the pump, closing off my escape routes. I was trapped, but I was trapped in my room. I had designed this system. I knew its every valve, its every pipe, its every weakness. "This room," I said, my voice loud and clear, projecting like a lecturer in a surgical theater, "is the geothermal heart of this entire building. It operates under immense pressure. The superheated water in these pipes is over 200 degrees Celsius. A catastrophic failure of even a single valve would release a jet of scalding steam that could strip flesh from bone in seconds." Leo paused, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. His associate looked nervously at the massive, shuddering pipes around them. "And this main pressure release valve," I said, placing my hand on a large red wheel beside me, "is an emergency override. It's designed to vent the entire system in case of a seismic event. It takes exactly 4 full rotations to open. And once it starts, it cannot be stopped." "You're bluffing," he snarled, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I replied, my fingers tightening on the wheel. My husband is gone. My life has been stolen. My name has been used to facilitate your crimes. What exactly do you think I have left to lose? You have two choices. You can walk out of that elevator and disappear forever, or we can all stay here and become part of this building's permanent foundation. The standoff was absolute. The only sounds were the hum of the machinery and our own ragged breathing. Leo's associate looked at him, his eyes wide with panic. This wasn't what he had signed up for. Don't be a fool, Leo hissed at me. You won't do it. You're a doctor. I feel her. You're not a killer. You're right, I said softly. I'm not. I'm a surgeon, and right now you have cancer. And I will do whatever it takes to cut you out. I began to turn the wheel dot. It was stiff, designed to prevent accidental release. My muscles screamed in protest. The first rotation was agonizing. A loud, groaning sound echoed through the room as the valve began to open. A small, almost invisible wisp of steam escaped from a nearby joint. Stop, Leo's associate screamed, scrambling backwards towards the elevator. Get her. Leo roared, but his associate was already gone, frantically jabbing the button to close the doors. Leo was alone. He looked at me, at the wheel, at the wisp of steam that was now a steady hissing. Plume. He saw the cold, unwavering resolve in my eyes. He saw that I was not bluffing. I would bring the whole damn building down on our heads before I let him win. He made his choice. With a final, hate-filled glare, he turned and sprinted for the closing elevator doors. Squeezing through just before they shut, I was alone on my legs. Gave out, and I sank to the floor, my body trembling with the aftermath of adrenaline. I hadn't been bluffing. I would have turned that wheel all the way. I looked at the ledger in my hand. I had the proof. I had survived, but the war was far from over. Leo was gone, but the organization he worked for was still out there. And now they knew I had their most valuable secret. I had won the battle. But the war had just begun. I was no longer a prisoner, but I was a target. I had the ledger, the weapon Ben had left for me, but I had no army. The organization, this shadowy group of art thieves and forgers, would not just let me walk away. They would hunt me. My escape from the basement wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a different kind of fight. I had proven I could survive. Now I had to prove I could win. In the humming silence of the pump room, I made a choice. Going to the police was the logical move, the safe move. But my life was no longer logical, and I no longer felt safe. The ledger in my hand wasn't just evidence. It was a map of my enemy's entire world, their network, their secrets. Handing it over would mean letting others fight my war, becoming a protected witness, a victim to be managed. But I was done being managed. I was done being a victim. I did not survive a coma and a madman in a basement to hide in the shadows. I was a surgeon. It was time to operate. My first call was not to the police, but to Grace. My second was to Arthur, my lawyer. We met that night in his dusty, book-lined office, a war council of 3, the surgeon, the nurse, and the lawyer. I laid the ledger on his mahogany desk. Arthur, bless his old-school heart, was aghast at my plan. Anya, this is insane, he protested. These are dangerous people. This is a matter for the FBI, for Interpol. Arthur, I said, my voice calm and firm, they operate in the shadows. A formal investigation will send them scurrying into deeper darkness. They'll disappear, sacrifice a few pawns like Leo, and rebuild. They stole my life, my husband's life, and they compromised the integrity of my work. This is personal. I'm not just looking for justice, I'm looking for eradication. I wanted to cut the cancer out, root and stem. The ledger was a masterpiece of cryptic record-keeping. It listed priceless, stolen artworks, a lost Da Vinci sketch, a Fabergé egg, a series of ancient manuscripts, and connected them to a list of the world's most powerful and untouchable billionaires, politicians, and corporate titans. These were not just buyers. They were partners in the organization, using their power and influence to facilitate the thefts and launder the money. The feathered serpent was their symbol, a secret club of the ultra-rich who treated history as their private collection. My plan was surgical. We wouldn't go to the authorities. We would go to the clients. We would use the one thing these people feared more than prison, public exposure. Over the next month, we worked in absolute secrecy. Grace, my loyal lieutenant, helped me disappear. I left my home, my hospital, my entire life behind, operating from a series of anonymous rented offices. Arthur, using his network of discreet international contacts, began to act as a concerned third party, a whisper in the ear of the powerful. The first target was a notoriously private tech billionaire, a man named Marcus Thorne, no relation, who, according to the ledger, was the proud owner of a stolen Rembrandt. Arthur's contact arranged a meeting. The message was simple. We know about your Rembrandt. We have the proof. The original museum acquisition records and Ben's ledger detailing the forgery of its provenance. A copy of this proof will be sent to every major news outlet in the world. Unless the painting is anonymously returned to the museum from which it was stolen within 48 hours, the billionaire panicked. His reputation was worth more than any painting. 2 days later, a crate arrived at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. Inside was the lost Rembrandt. No note, no explanation. It just appeared. We repeated the process, one by one, down the list. A corrupt senator's stolen collection of Roman antiquities was left on the steps of a museum in Rome. A priceless diamond, the Star of Bengal, was anonymously mailed to the Tower of London. We were ghosts, using the thread of light to force these creatures of darkness to give up their treasures. With each returned artifact, the organization grew weaker, more paranoid. They were being dismantled from within, their powerful clients turning on them to save themselves. The final move was for Leo, and for the organization's shadowy leader, a man the ledger only referred to as the curator. I had the data stick. Ben had left, which contained encrypted financial records. Maria, the retired software engineer from my Lyra Innovations days, helped me decrypt it. It was a roadmap to their entire financial empire. I sent one final, anonymous package. This one went to the Department of Justice's white-collar crime division. It contained the entire decrypted data stick, along with a detailed explanation of their money-laundering scheme. I left out the names of the powerful clients who had already returned the art, giving them their one chance at redemption. But I included every detail about the curators and Leo's personal finances. A week later, the news broke. A massive international sting operation. The curator, a respected Swiss banker, was arrested in Zurich. And Leo, my imposter, was apprehended trying to board a private jet in Miami. His face, splashed across the news, was no longer handsome and confident, but pale, thin, and terrified. I watched it all from a small cafe in Florence, Italy, a city of art and rebirth. I had my life back, but it wasn't the life I had before. The old blueprint was gone forever. I had no desire to return to the high-pressure world of surgery, to the life of the celebrated Dr. Anya Sharma. I have the ledger. I could have used it to claim a fortune in rewards from museums and insurance companies. But I didn't want their money. I mailed the ledger, anonymously, to the tech journalist Julianne Moore, the woman who had hosted the gala in what felt like another lifetime. I trusted her to tell the full story. My work was done. The cancer was excised. I had my freedom, a modest amount of money from the sale of my old assets, and a new, profound understanding of who I was. I was not just a surgeon who fixed hearts. I was a woman who had survived the shattering of her own reality and had built a new one from the pieces. I finished my espresso, left a few euros on the table, and walked out into the warm Italian sun. I didn't know where I was going next. For the first time in my life, I had no blueprint, no design. My future was an unwritten page. And for the first time, that felt not like a terrifying void, but like the most beautiful, exhilarating freedom imaginable.